Hello and welcome to this Caretta Research webinar in partnership with Vindicia. And we're going to be getting beneath super aggregation in this session. We're going to be understanding how a good super aggregation model goes beyond the bundle. And we're going to be unpacking, hopefully, some of the secrets of doing super aggregation well. What you're hearing over the next 45 minutes or so is based on the work that we've done here at Caretta Research with Vindicia and a report that we published just at the end of last year. The link to download that report, if you haven't done already, is on screen, and I'll pop it up again before the end of the webinar if you want to take a look. Lots of good stuff in there, and we'll kind of do a précis of the content in this webinar to help you digest it. My name is Rob Ambrose. I'm the co-founder of Caretta Research, and what we do is help people make better technology decisions, whether they are suppliers or buyers. Highly focused on media technology, where I think we're now the leading media technology research firm. And we have a particular focus on this area, this topic of everything to do with streaming and online video platforms, as well as the content supply chain that supports that and the ways that content is distributed. Now, to talk through the report and some of the findings on super aggregation, I've got with me two colleagues from Vindicia and Vubiquity. So we've got, depending on where you're looking at your screen, Jeremy Simon, who is VP and Head of Global Streaming Partnerships at Amdocs Media. Welcome to you, Jeremy.
Hi, Rob. Hi, everyone.
And we've also got Jesus Lozado, who is VP and Head of Global Partnerships and International Sales at Vindicia. Welcome to you, Jesus.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, everyone.
Now, if you're watching us live, then we are live. I know it's kind of rare for webinars. So many of them are pre-canned and pre-recorded, but we are really live and really interactive. Although, of course, we are also recording it so you can watch it back or share it with colleagues. But what that means is if you want to ask any questions, please do, and we will answer them or do our very best. So feel free to put us on the spot with questions and we'll drop those through. The structure for today's session is we're going to sort of structure things around 5 key themes, each of which sort of captures some of the findings from the research that we've done on super aggregation. We've tried to make it easy to digest and also kind of actionable, to use a buzzword. So in other words, hope to leave you with some practical ideas and information. So let's get stuck in. And the first topic that we wanted to look at is a bit of an overview. What is super aggregation, and well, why is it so important? So we define super aggregation in the report as really being an experience-led strategy. It's all about delivering a better user experience that integrates the discovery and the consumption and potentially the transactions with a whole range of different content services and other digital services in one very elegantly designed, easy to use environment. The point is that you make it a one-stop shop for a household's digital consumption, keeping them engaged longer by making it just easier and better to discover and consume and use all of those content services in one place. So the trick of being a successful super aggregator is to make the user experience better than the users can achieve by getting those same digital services on their own. And really, we've sort of identified 3 themes of what makes a super aggregator, what they need to do. So they need to provide an integrated user experience that brings together all of that content and digital services under a virtual roof, a consistent user interface, and very often, but not always, that's based on a dedicated hardware device, like a set-top box, a smart TV, or a streaming stick. We'll dig into that a little bit later. Another key thing is delivering unified search and discovery of content services, allowing users to find what they want without needing to know where it is. We all hear tales of how consumers are bombarded with a whole range of content and digital services. Super aggregation is a way to make that easier to consume, and it also becomes a really crucial shop window for new services, whether they're video streaming services or other digital apps. Increasingly, if you're launching an app or a service, it's very difficult to reach a critical mass of consumers without being on super aggregation platforms. And of course, those platforms make it easier to find that stuff without needing to know about it first through things like personalization and recommendations. And then the third pillar is enabling simplified transactions across content and services. So, for example, bringing everything together into a unified subscription, offering single sign-on so people don't need multiple passwords, and managing entitlement on a service across different members of the household, across different devices, and whether they're using the super aggregator platform or standalone. And of course, also allowing users to bring existing subscriptions that they may have into the environment. So those are really the pillars of super aggregation. And I suppose to qualify as a super aggregator, you probably need to be doing at least 2 out of those 3. So that's our first theme. Let me bring Jeremy and Jesus back in. Now, we've called the report Beyond the Bundle, and obviously the transactional element is a key part of that. But how does super aggregation go further than the sort of bundling that's been going on in our industry for several years now? Jeremy, what are your thoughts on that?
So what I'd say is I come from the content industry, and to me, as convergence has happened, we're seeing more and more silos that evolved in the industry. The first silo was, which input are you on? Are you having to switch inputs to consume different services? We're getting over that. We're starting to see more services in the same input. Then we have another issue, which is, well, if you switch between those services, are you having to leave one to go into the other? And we're now seeing with integrated search, metadata, deep linking, that you can actually bypass that. There's another silo, which is how you find and consume these services, how you subscribe. Can you buy some on platform, but others you have to go off platform to buy? How do you register? How do you sign up, sign in? So what we're seeing is if you can really crack each of those silos, break down the walls, and provide a really clean, crisp customer experience from the search to the discovery, consumption, account management, through the whole life cycle, you can really add value for your customers.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. Jesus, from your perspective, where do you see super aggregation as going beyond the models that we've become accustomed to?
Yeah, and I think you and Jeremy elaborated into that. But as you mentioned at the beginning, this is an experience-led strategy, and it's key. If you look at some data, consumers, in a recent survey, we saw that 63% of the consumers are expecting personalized experience. 71% of the consumers would prefer to buy a single subscription bundle if that bundle is relevant and personalized for them. So the consumer convenience and the consumer experience is at the center of the super aggregation model. That's the key to go beyond bundle. And I think Jeremy elaborated on the key elements of that experience to really become relevant for that consumer. So for me, is all about the way that the super aggregator really manage that experience end to end, and how offer that consumer an easy to discover, use, and pay type of services.
Great, thank you for those thoughts. Let's take a look at the second theme now, and who benefits. Obviously, people are only going to use a super aggregation model if it creates some sort of value. And I think one of the reasons that super aggregation is proving so popular and is gaining traction so quickly is that everybody benefits. There are really few losers in the super aggregation approach. So let's sort of unpack that and see how individual people in the value chain benefit. Not often you have something that's a zero-sum game where everyone can benefit and nobody loses out. The content and app owners, the people who are providing the content streaming services and the other digital services, the benefit to them is that they can maximize market reach, attracting more subscribers at a much lower cost, and then keep them longer, which is, of course, all of the things that a streaming service or a digital platform wants to do. speaking to some services, they say, well, if we launch direct to consumer using our own app alone, we'll get a toehold in a new market. But when we want to reach critical scale in that market, that's the time that we do partnerships with aggregators so that our content, our app, is in front of as many consumers as possible. So it's really a crucial part of the marketing process for streamers in particular. And I think video streamers are starting to pay much more attention to how they run their marketing funnel. The process of attracting users, converting them, keeping them, maximizing the long-term value. Super aggregation is a crucial enabler for that. Now, for those people who are doing the aggregating, they also benefit. In the old model, pay TV platforms, for example, had to cut carriage deals with TV channels, or they had to license premium content directly. And of course, they still do that, and that's an important part of the super aggregation play as well. But what super aggregation allows them to do is offer a vastly wider range of content at much lower risk without them having to invest upfront. So they can, in effect, offer more value to their subscribers, their customers, and it gives them a defensive position against the changes in consumer behavior towards streaming services and cord cutting. And it's interesting, that can obviously work for incumbent operators, pay TV providers, cable and satellite providers, for example. But it's also, and maybe this is one downside of super aggregation to the established players in the industry, it is opening up the market to new competitors, such as smart TV platforms or streaming stick providers, who can now compete on an almost level playing field with the very established pay TV providers. And then the third group to benefit, of course, is the consumers, because they're getting access to all of the content and services that they want in a much simpler way, with much simpler discovery of those content. It becomes easier for them to access and try and sample content, and reduces the sort of risk of subscription fatigue that can come from consumers that have got multiple subscriptions in play at any one time. So that's who can benefit from super aggregation. Let me come back to our panel now. Jesus, I know that subscription fatigue is something that you focused on quite a bit. Presumably, super aggregation is a great way to reduce that risk for operators and aggregators.
Absolutely. I mean, the super aggregators, if this is provided in the right way, will address that subscription fatigue. And just for the audience, I think it's important to understand, when we talk about subscription fatigue, the subscription model and the video content proliferation of subscription services is getting more and more momentum. But the fatigue comes from the point of view of the consumer. They are exposed to a variety of services that they would like to subscribe, because there are some pieces of relevant content for them. And the challenge for them is to select, access each of them in a very convenient, easy way. So super aggregation addresses that, because providing that, a centralized, personalized user experience for access and use of those services, mitigate that subscription fatigue. And I think is very important for content owners to understand also the value of the super aggregation model, because as you described before, most of them don't have the market reach or the resources to achieve that market reach that they require to sustain growth, unless they become part of a platform that gives them that reach. And this is the beauty of this model for the content aggregators as well.
Yeah, and Jeremy, in your work with content owners and aggregators, what are the sort of results they're seeing? What are you seeing as the upside for them?
Well, the first thing I'd maybe say is, I don't think it's a zero-sum game where pay TV traditional operators lose and the OEMs or new entrants win. I actually think that the pay TV operators are some of the best aggregators out there. And what I'm hearing from the OTTs is, a lot of the OTT started, especially in the streaming space. They were networks, they were studios. They never had to manage customers themselves, maybe with the exception of theme parks. And so they haven't had that 20 years track record in managing customers, finding customers, working out how to engage them, how to get them through a sign-up process without losing them, how to get them not only to buy, but to buy more, how to get that money out of them, get the payments through, how to keep them, how to recontract them, and when they want to leave, how to try and persuade them not to leave. And so what I think we're seeing is, the industry is going a bit full circle. The pay TV operators have provided that function historically for networks and studios, and now able to provide the same function for OTTs. And on the OTT side, what we're seeing is, we're reading about reports, there's more churn, there's more competition. From a customer point of view, there's subscription overload, subscription fatigue, more swapping. So it's not just churning or shaving, cutting the cord, it's also swapping from cord A to cord B. The industry is really ripe for these kind of partnerships to come through. And then what we see for customers, we ask what these partnerships can deliver. To me, super aggregation really hits three things for customers. The first is customer value. So customers want discounts. How do you offer discounts? By offering enough that you can cover the cost of the discount across the bundle. The second is choice. There's so many services you could choose. How do you choose which to take? That's the role of the aggregator, to help guide that customer. The paradox of choice, if you put 100 apps in front of a customer, they may not subscribe to any, but if you put 10, they may take all 10. And so this is where the super aggregator can really help the customer with those choices. And then the third, I'd say, is customer effort. We see a lot of customers struggling. We do research, we get feedback from our partners around customer confusion, digital, fatigue. Jesus talked about customers really struggling to navigate their different subscriptions. You hear stories about people in the same household subscribing to the same service without telling each other. These kind of stories. If super aggregation is done right, it can not only be in the TV, it can be at all devices in the home, and it can give the family the confidence that these are the subscriptions we offer. We know where they are, how to manage them. If our credit card changes, it flows through. We don't need to constantly micromanage. And once you give customers that confidence, they're actually willing to buy more. And so to me, super aggregation really, it translates into customer confidence.
Great, thank you. And I think it really is the beauty of this model, that it isn't the zero-sum game, that all three of these pillars can benefit. So that's a really important point to make. Now, equally, there's no one size fits all. So I think it's worth spending a little bit of time just thinking about the different models for super aggregation, because here there are opportunities for lots of different players in the market. Before I do that, let me just remind you that if you are watching the live webcast, you can ask questions. So do that using the app, and we'll pick those up as we go. So we took this matrix from the report itself, and this is a little bit complex, but it covers the key models and approaches for super aggregation. So we're seeing three main models. What we're calling device-centric super aggregation, which is where the aggregation is built around a dedicated hardware device, such as a smart TV, and we'll look at these sort of emerging markets in a little while, but in-car infotainment systems is another example. And the results of that could be where selling the device itself is the main aim, such as with smart TVs. And therefore, this is about adding value to the hardware device. Also, where the device is a core enabler, such as with voice-controlled devices. Or in some cases, where the device is a bit of a Trojan horse to get into the customer's living room, and the content is really the game there. So the likes of the streaming sticks, yes, they're hardware centric, but the main aim is not necessarily to sell the hardware itself, unlike with a smart TV maker, but the device still plays a crucial function. So device centric aggregation, really, really important. We're also seeing operator-centric aggregation, typically led by a pay TV or telco. And in this case, they have the established subscriber base. And the model here is a little different because it's around pivoting to a super aggregation model to improve the experience for their users and ultimately remain competitive. Now, that may also be, of course, enabled by a hardware device, particularly a set-top box platform. And we've seen, investment in new set-top box architectures, particularly those based on RDK and Android TV operator tier, driving, a much easier ability to deliver a super aggregation model, the ability to add more content types and to do the level, personalization on top of that. But of course, in these cases, again, selling the hardware device itself isn't the primary focus. These are operator plays. And you've seen, many of the operators coming to market with new visually led, content led super aggregation platforms that really take the pay TV experience far beyond the sort of traditional linear zapper box that many consumers are used to. And then the third model is one that's app-centric. So you can be a super aggregator without having any hardware by bringing together content into an app. And that could again be from an operator, an untethered product, something like Sky Now TV. Or we see new entrants, players like Strum, a Canadian-based service, which is aggregating effectively the long tail of SVOD services into a single app. And of course, those apps themselves can appear on super aggregation platforms. Mm-hmm. Then there's different ways of doing, regardless of the device, doing the aggregation. So at its simplest level, the hardware platform can aggregate multiple apps and add on the sort of common discovery layer, the common interface, typically with integration to the catalog and deep linking. But then often in parallel, you may have aggregation of content itself, where the aggregator is directly ingesting the content and metadata into its own back-end system. And you see this with things like Amazon Prime Channels or Prime Video Direct. And then there's a really interesting emerging simple model of simply aggregating the metadata. And in this case, the content owner themselves still manages the delivery of the content to the user and pays for that and manages the encryption and the packaging and the CDN costs. But there's somebody in the middle that's bringing together the catalog and deep linking back to the content. So it's possible to be a super aggregator, interestingly, without having your own platform and without necessarily even cutting any deals with content providers. Not saying that's the main model or the best model, but it is being done by some of those players out there. And then, of course, the types of things that can be aggregated, still linear TV channels remain really important on many of these platforms. That still drives the audience, and it's now being supplemented with fast channels, free ad-supported streaming TV channels, and also linear channels that are direct to the set-top box without going through a traditional broadcast infrastructure. Then, of course, you've got all of the video on demand services, whether they're AVOD, BVOD, SVOD, TVOD, PVOD. Again, a really important mainstay of all of the super aggregation services. But the really interesting thing, and we'll look at some more examples in a minute, we're starting to see the emergence of other digital services, such as health and fitness apps, or audio services, be it podcasts or music streaming, gaming, smart home and security, and education. So those services are also starting to appear on the super aggregation platforms. So it feels in a way that we're sort of almost at the beginning of this journey in terms of what's possible here. So let me turn back to our panel and sort of discuss that a little bit more. Jeremy, are you seeing all of these models coexisting in the market? Do you think one or other will become dominant as the market matures, or is this going to be sort of an industry where there are lots of different super aggregation models sitting aside each other?
I think I was interested in what you said about Now TV, because that's part of Sky. You've got Sky Q in the middle, and you could have Sky Glass at the top, and you could do the same for Comcast with their new TV and Peacock. And to me, what's really interesting is different companies, different parts of different companies can actually play in very different spaces across this. You mentioned, certain models don't require rights deals. I think where and how you play in this space might be, in the short term, a function of what rights you have available. So if you take Sky as an example, They own a lot of the content in the UK. They have done for many years. They have very deep relationships. They also have the largest customer base. That allows them to take control over new relationships. It allows them to innovate. So in the case of Now TV, they, probably the first TV operator I've seen in the world to do day passes or week passes rather than the traditional monthly subscription. That allows you to market to a customer who only wanted to watch a game. And then back in the day, that was just a pay-per-view experience with a cable TV customer. Now, this could be a direct-to-consumer experience for any customer. And we're seeing the success of Now TV. It's now being carried by some of their competitors. And so, not everyone is going to have the scale of Sky, but I think that model shows you how different companies, either at different times or with different rights, can actually offer multiple models here.
That's almost a perfect segue into the first question we've received from a member of the audience today. So I'm going to ask that, and Jesus, maybe you can sort of help answer it. It's from Zveli Mtembu, who asks, are traditional MVPDs the future super aggregators? Because, of course, they may see that SVOD is a competitor for subscription revenues and AVOD is a competitor for advertising revenues. Will they be super aggregators, or are we likely to see the device OEMs as the future super aggregators? So I think, Zveli, my view on that is both of the above. I think traditional MVPDs, i.e. pay TV operators, can't afford not to become super aggregators because their audiences will turn to those SVOD and AVOD services in any case. And really the play here for pay TV operators is to remain relevant to their users and add that additional value on top. They can still play a really crucial role in connecting those streaming services to their customers and managing the billing and managing the recommendation and personalization. I think we'll see the device makers and OEMs in parallel to that offering a similar service, but without the sort of the live and linear TV elements. So that's my take on it. Jesus, what would you think? Are we going to see both, or will one or other win out?
No, I think I agree with what you describe, and I think the key here is what Jeremy mentioned about country by country, region by region, about the licensing rights on some of the content that is going to create who is the dominant player in that particular ecosystem. There is no doubts about it that MVPDs, especially the traditional pay TV operators, require that additional relevant content to avoid the trend of cord cutting, correct? So that's, for them, is critical to do that. But I think the device centric by the way, both I think can coexist as you described it in the matrix that you show, because most of these MVPDs are using a device to deliver their aggregated content. And the device, this is a play for some of the platforms in the market. The device has been always viewed as the gateway to the home and the gateway to really control the experience of all the participants of different services in that home. So definitely we're gonna continue to see these different type of aggregators coexist, and which one dominates in a particular market is going to depend on the particular dynamics in that market, and very related to licensing rights of the different content.
I think the other role, of course, that both MVPDs and telcos play in this market is with billing. And whereas in credit card friendly markets, it's much easier for the SVOD players to go direct to their audiences. That's not the case in many markets in the world where payment cards are not established, or different types of payment cards are used, or different payment methods are used. And of course, then operators, be they pay TV or telco, play a crucial role in their ability to have that billing relationship with the audience, and of course managing things like direct carrier billing and bundling in the subscription element as well. So yeah, there's a role.
No,
go ahead.
Yep. No, go ahead, Rob. I was gonna make an additional comment, but please go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I was going to move on to the next theme. So good point.
So no, you're making a very good point, especially in international emerging markets. And I always use the example of Netflix. If Netflix wants to go beyond the 25% penetration of credit cards in Latin America or 15% penetration in APAC, if they want to penetrate the market beyond that, they need to rely on these platforms and aggregators and ecosystems that they already resolved the billing challenges because they have been providing services into the market for a long time. This is also another driver in some markets to participate in a super aggregation offering.
Yeah, great.
I can give you an example. I was talking to a partner that launched in the Philippines, and they didn't support multiple payment methods. And in that country, there's low credit card adoption and low bank account penetration. And what they realized in hindsight is if they supported digital wallets and all these alternative creative ways of payments, they would have had more success. But unfortunately, it's only having gone through that process that you realize it. And in that case, many of those most strong digital wallets are actually provided by the telcos. So, everything comes back together.
Yeah. Now, it sounds like we're almost starting to touch on the topic of roadblocks. So let's have a look at that. Now, I think we've pretty much established through the research in the report, but the discussion today, that super aggregation is pretty much a good thing for most people involved. So what are the bits of it that are hard to do? Well, that's where we started to explore some of the roadblocks to delivering successful super aggregation in the report. And if you want to pull out the top 3 topics, we've got them here. So the first one, like all good technology projects, it involves quite complex and time-consuming and expensive technical integration to be able to onboard the different services, to be able to integrate catalogs and metadata, and to be able to integrate the content itself and the player and make that work, and then share user credentials and entitlement and billing. That can add cost, which then deters aggregators and aggregatees going into this model. But perhaps more importantly, it creates a delay. And this is a market where time to market is crucial. There's such a competitive market for digital media streaming and consumption that time to market is probably the key KPI when it comes to success. You really don't want to delay. In a subscription business, delay means lost revenue that can never be recovered again in future. So in order to do successful super aggregation, there's got to be an approach to streamline that technology integration and to be able to deliver that sort of low friction user experience by making all of the plumbing behind the scenes work. And that's not only between the aggregator platform and all of the partners, but it can also be within an aggregator environment, particularly if you're wanting to integrate your new super aggregation service into a legacy back office of particularly in telecom environments, OSS and BSS. That needs a lot of integration work. So that's the first roadblock, and we'll talk with the panel in a moment about some strategies to overcome these. The second challenge, particularly for the content and app owners, is that it does disrupt control of the consumer relationship and all important data. And everybody that's running their own streaming platform, their own online video platform, knows that data and analytics are crucial. But once you're exposing that service through a super aggregator, you may be losing some or all of that data. In some cases, you will get the data once the user is in your app and consuming, but then you don't necessarily know how they got there. But with some of those super aggregation models, particularly the content-based one, you may get very limited data at all because the content is being served up by the aggregator themselves. So I think there's a challenge for the industry there in terms of how to handle that. It's often a trade-off that content owners will take because of the upside benefits of being able to reach a larger audience. But I also think there's an opportunity for aggregators themselves to become more appealing to their partners by giving more data back. And that's certainly something we've seen in the music streaming industry, where aggregators like Spotify are generally regarded as giving pretty good data and useful data back to their content partners. And then the third roadblock that pops up time and time again is around metadata. You have to integrate metadata and content catalogs from a whole variety of sources, including all of the legacy linear TV EPG program guide data, and every content provider has a different taxonomy. It calls things differently. Genres have no common standards across platforms. But if you want to then offer that in a unified form, there has to be quite a bit of integration of different metadata and mapping of things in the background to make that work. So those are some of the key roadblocks we see. Jeremy and Jesus, what are some of the approaches that you've seen for overcoming some of those roadblocks?
Maybe if I can start on the technical side. So in the old world, if you're a TV operator, you wanted to launch an app, you had to get the app built and successfully launched on your platform, and you had to support payment integration. Those took a lot of time, but it was also an unpredictable amount of time. So, you talked about the challenges of launching. Often the launch would be timed to, there was a new device coming out, a new plan being launched, a new customer offer being launched, or on the OTT side, maybe they had a new tentpole show coming out. And so everyone was working towards this target, but you didn't really have confidence that you would hit those dates. And that meant that you couldn't put your full weight of marketing behind that. And oftentimes those dates were missed through no one's fault, just because of the complexity. And those opportunities to take advantage of those marketing campaigns were also missed. Now what we're seeing with the power of super aggregation is that if you can get the technical integration right, you can get the payment integration, the app integration right, and we support all of these, and then you can give the customer confidence, not only that they can do it, but they can do it well and on time. That then allows them to do better deals with their content partners because they have much more confidence. I can commit to the marketing dollars, the campaign that the deal requires, because I know I can do it on time. And all of a sudden you start getting into that sweet spot where the time to market is so much faster. You can have a conversation with someone, identify an opportunity, and all of those roadblocks that used to hum and ha and think, well, this is a lovely idea on paper, but can we actually do it? Can we do it on time? Can we do it on budget? We can address those concerns, remove those concerns, and all of a sudden you can open the deal floodgates.
Jesus, your thoughts on that? Unblocking the roadblocks?
Yeah, sorry. They totally agree on the challenges on the technical side. But I think there are other challenges in terms of the commercial models between those content apps and the aggregators that also need to be considered, as especially the content owners are a little bit apprehensive of become part of an aggregator on the commercial terms, and also on the way the consumer discover the services, because they can be lost in that aggregated bundle in the offering. And I think the metadata integration is critical to avoid that for the user to really discover the personalized content regardless of the source and the app. And in that way, we start seeing some aggregators that are tackling that challenge of the experience and the discovery, and the commercial challenge is still out there, and it's the elephant in the room in many of the discussions between aggregators and content owners, and needs to be addressed for this model to continue to grow.
Okay, great. Thanks. Now, before we move on to our final theme, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock here, I just want to very quickly add in another question that we've received from Virginia, which I think is relevant at this point. What can super aggregators learn from the traditional MVPDs who, particularly in the US, have often perhaps alienated consumers to an extent by building a lot of bundles with, as Virginia puts it, overstuffed with services they didn't want or need? Do we risk going down that same route with super aggregators, bundling more and more and more services into these platforms?
So I can maybe start, because I came from an MVPD, and I would actually absolve us of blame and put all of the blame on the content providers, because most big cable bundles were really created because the content owner said, well, if you want this one channel, you've got to take our other 10. You've got to put them in the same package, and we're going to give you a rate card that means you might as well, because it's going to cost you the same either way. So I think, without being flippant, it's important that both the content and the distribution sides of the industry align on coming up with customer-friendly packages, prices, bundles, and propositions. Because what the biggest lesson of the last few years is that if you don't do that, the customers will just go elsewhere. They'll spend their lives using TikTok and YouTube and other services, or they'll go to other devices. And so it's really important to be relevant and meet the customer needs.
And perhaps that's the difference now, isn't it? Because in the old world of cable TV, the customer had no other way of getting ESPN or HBO legally. Now they do. And that's where the difference comes.
Yeah, and I think the other learning from the all MVPD model is the way the subscriber or the consumer subscribe to those services. Because in the super aggregation model is on a subscription basis. Subscription basis means this now the subscriber has, unless they have the relevant content in front of them, they have the flexibility to cancel the service anytime without any obligations on a contract for long term. So it's more imperative now for content owners and MVPDs or the super aggregators to really provide the consumer with that relevant content. Otherwise, the consumer is going to go elsewhere and they have no obligations with that provider.
Yeah, I think if there's a consistent theme here, it's about keeping the consumer at the center of everything. And probably then you can't go too far wrong. Our fifth and final theme now, and that is thinking about how super aggregation goes beyond video and beyond the living room. And I know we've spoken a lot about video so far because that's really what has driven super aggregation to date. But I think we see the early signs of that changing. So to be a good super aggregator model, it's typically hardware enabled, as we touched on at the front, and it's typically delivering a lean back experience, one that's often location specific, be it in the living room or in a car, as in it's not somebody individually consuming on their mobile device. And it's often aimed at a household rather than an individual. So with that in mind, you can start to see about other situations and other kinds of services that work in a super aggregation model. One of them we see, I think, perhaps is that the next potential battleground for super aggregation is with in-car infotainment systems. And there's interesting potential to bundle not only content services, but other digital services that are relevant in that context, such as access to EV charging or tolling or parking. So you can start to see the automakers, if they follow the super aggregation playbook, playing more of a role in delivering those services through the in-car infotainment screen. And then I think going beyond video within even the living room, you're starting to see some really interesting models, particularly around smart home and health and fitness. Just a couple that I'll briefly mention. Telefonica has a living apps program, which is all about encouraging digital service providers onto their platforms across education and games and social media. Telefonica is providing the payment services and identity and authentication and data in return. And the interesting thing is what they don't want to do is replicate a mobile app store. They're looking for services that are tuned for that device in that location, the super aggregation play. And I think Iliad Free in France is a really interesting example of building a super aggregation service around their Android TV-based set-top box device, integrating newspapers and magazines and music streaming, smart home automation. So you can stream and listen to music on their high-end audio devices, and then you can get their voice control device to dim the smart home lighting in time to watch the movie. So you can start to see how the sum of the parts potentially becomes greater than the individual parts. So back to Jesus and Jeremy briefly, and we're coming towards the end of our time. Do you see these big sort of areas of super aggregation beyond video, beyond the living room? Jesus, I know this is something you've particularly focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important part is here you need to reach the consumer where they are anytime through any screen. And aggregators needs to be able to have that ability to go beyond the living room and meet the consumer in any screen. So we're starting to see some examples of that, for example. And by the way, I don't think Comcast is a great example today of a perfect aggregator, because still the consumer experience is fragmented through the different apps. But Comcast is now enabling Xfinity Go or Xfinity Stream, where you can access those services on the road, or with an iPad, a cell phone. Eventually, they're going to start doing that with car manufacturers and other screens. So I think that's critical. And going back to the other point you mentioned about aggregating much more than just video or music, this is becoming more and more relevant with the evolving habits of the consumer. All of us as consumers, we have a very fragmented digital lifestyle every day, and we access hundreds of apps every day. If I can have the possibility to have a single personalized access to most of them, it will be very convenient, very easy for me, and it will create attachment and engagement with that particular provider. So I think that's something that we're going to continue to see and expand.
Now we're nearly up against time here, so what I'd like to do is move on to just our final summary slide, and then we'll just sort of wrap up with a final thought from each of you. And this is what are some of the critical success factors in super aggregation, and the report kind of identifies a number of these. I'll also give you the link to download the report here if you didn't already, and if I can do the buttons right, I'm going to do it as a pop-up link on the screen in a minute. But overall, the sort of critical success factors we identified, as I think we've mentioned several times now, it's about creating better experiences that make it easier, better for the consumer to use the super aggregator platform, rather than going individually to those providers, which they still can do. Launch fast by prioritizing is also key. Don't wait until you've ticked all of those super aggregation boxes before going forward. Start with the app integration, or add the metadata integration, add the transactional and the identity and entitlement integration. Get started quick, time to market. I think developing simpler approaches for integration, particularly common repeatable approaches for integration, standardized APIs, to reduce the time to market and reduce the time of each new onboarding is key. And that's something that both the content and app owners need to do, and the aggregators. I think there's a real advantage to those who can find unique content and services to offer, be it more fast channels or adding in those non-video services that we talked about. I think there's an advantage to be gained, and we talk about this in the report, of selecting the right technology partners and platforms who can help streamline this process, for example, with sort of pre-integrated components. And as we touched on a moment ago, there's great potential, I think, to share data. Aggregators could give themselves an immediate market advantage in terms of wooing the best content and service providers by offering back privacy compliant data. And that starts to remove some of the barriers that the content owners have. Briefly, Jesus and Jeremy, perhaps each of you in turn could share your advice to both content owners and platform owners for making a success of this. And while you're doing that, I'll put the download link on. So Jesus first, perhaps your thoughts.
I will keep it very simple. Any suggestion for any aggregator? Everything you do, keep in mind what is the vision. Provide easy to discover, easy to use, easy to pay type of aggregated services, keeping a personalized experience. You keep that as a north, and everything you do needs to be aligned with that.
Great. Jeremy?
I completely echo what Jesus said. The only thing I'd maybe add is put the customer at the center of everything. And when I say everything, I mean not only the customer experience, but also the deals between the aggregators and the content partners. Don't necessarily fight for every single thing. Make sure what happens is the customer gets the best opportunity to find your service, consume your service. And on the aggregation side, make sure you have the most customer-friendly experience in terms of the range of services you can surface to them, what you're able to do on the metadata side. So I think get it right for the customer, and everything else will follow.
Fantastic. Thank you both for joining me today, and thank you for watching and seeing our thoughts on why superaggregation is such an important part of the emerging both video streaming and operator and device ecosystem. If you haven't already taken a look at the report, please do. I think it's quite useful, although obviously I'm a little bit biased. If you want to share this webinar with your colleagues, it will be available for replay shortly after we've finished. So you can send them to the same landing page and they can get access to that, and you can see all of the slides as well. But for now, thank you so much for you joining us, and thank you, Jesus and Jeremy, for taking part. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.